Joseph Ochieno is a writer and commentator on African affairs. He joins me live from London. Joseph, what did each side hope to gain from these talks, and did they get it?
I think for President Kenyatta, just a trip on the handshake with an American president is good enough because he was twice elected under controversial circumstances, and he just survived sanctions from the Americans. And indeed, it's the Americans who pushed that he actually does have a handshake with his opponent, Raila Odinga, and so a semblance of political peace and stability in Kenya today. So from Kenyatta's perspective, that is good enough. In terms of the bilateral arrangements, Kenya already gets a substantial amount of money, and if I hear about $5 million US, that is pocket change for what China would normally do these days in some of those countries, particularly an important ally like Kenya. But I mean, that having been said, on the other hand, both sides, particularly when it comes to security, Kenya borders Somalia. Kenya rather came with a rather hard line stance on Somalia by talking the walls as if it's Mexico. Kenya also is substantially involved in South Sudan. So those are two rather polarized nations in there. But Kenya is, of course, at the sea. And America and the Brits have always traditionally used Kenya as a base, basically, as an eye on the region. So that having been said, on the other hand, the Americans would like to be able to see that they maintain and retain Kenyan influence, both politically and economically. So there is something to be gained from both sides. But for the Americans, it is basically simply saying that, well, we are back, you are old allies, well, and we've not gone. Because any space they give, the Chinese will come.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because I want to move on to my next talking point, and I don't have much time. There's been a lot of criticism that Africa is simply not on the radar of this administration. Critics say there is no Africa policy. Is that a fair criticism from President Trump's White House?
Extremely fair, except, as I said, the Kenyans would probably, in this case, the Kenyan president is simply just desperate. The other day, President Trump made a comment which is less than generous, and I don't know how the Nigerians are going to respond, but good enough, the Brits are visiting Nigeria very soon, perhaps the day after tomorrow. That having been said, I think America, even after Obama was substantially criticized that probably ought to have done much better. He was expected to do much better, but for those of us who are observers both in the West and in Africa, we sort of understood him. But from this administration, I think Africa really did not and has not really mattered, simply because President Trump has, by and large, and Africans consider that, been much more keen on undoing what Obama attempted to achieve in foreign policy.
Joseph, what about the relationship with China and China's Belt and Road Initiative in terms of economic aid, in terms of investment, in terms of trade? How important is China to the African continent?
China at the moment is the guy to beat. And as I said, the Americans probably, beyond the question of security, these trade items are basically just a symbolism. Anything else, they basically just want to make sure that they check the Chinese, because the Chinese come with money. China is now going to places that he used to not traditionally go. The Chinese president the other day was in Rwanda, although Rwanda these days is not necessarily the good boys. Rwanda and Uganda, they're not necessarily the good boys that they used to be. It's extremely important when you see Chinese and Indians going there. Why? Because it's about commodities and resources. But of course, for someone like Kenyatta and for those of us who observe Africa, would rather say that right now, African leaders need to begin to become smart and make sure that whoever they engage with, they really get genuine and real value for money.
All right, Joseph Ochieno, thank you, sir.